Welcome to Simplify My Small Business, episode 51. The final episode, Adam Stanecki, dissecting Tim Ferriss's DEAL methodology.
It's pretty good for Tim. He'll feel like we've left him alone after we finish it today. His DEAL methodology won't get any further violated by us.
His Google alerts will stop going off every 2 weeks.
Pinging, ping, ping. Who are these guys? Why are they talking about me?
What are they talking about? So we were saying before we started recording this episode, Adam, that liberation is kind of the cloud, isn't it, really? This is what you're constructing the steps to get up to in the other three phases. So
the big dangling carrot.
Yeah, in a way, liberation doesn't really have its own episode. It is what you achieve. So
there are a few key points to talk about. There's no theory here, though. There's no, here are the steps to liberate, because you already did that in definition, elimination, automation. So it's not like there's a map for this part. This is kind of okay, you got there, you got all of your stuff in order. What are you going to do now? What, do you twiddle your thumbs? What do you do?
I can definitely say that you and I would go crazy if all we did was twiddle our thumbs.
I reckon it would last me about 6 months like this. I see this whole DEAL thing as being very cyclic. And I've applied it in part to what I'm doing. And my goals aren't sort of to, sit on the beach for the rest of my life. So I see this, I reckon I could last 6 months in the liberation phase before I had to do something else, like go and build something more.
Well, I definitely agree. I see it as a very cyclical thing, the deal thing. It almost should be, your 6 monthly or your annual review. Okay, in the next 12 months, where do I want to achieve liberation in my time or in my kind of results?
Yeah, I guess what we've talked about so far is the big picture kind of liberation, like liberating yourself from work and the chains of having to make a wage. But we haven't talked about the fact that it can be used in a much smaller fashion to chunk down your goals, as you just said. And that's another cool thing to take away from the whole idea. It can be applied to so many different facets of life and business.
I think it was in the 4-Hour Workweek that Ferriss was talking about his philosophy where for every 2 projects he would take a period of time off in his schedule.
Yeah, that rings a bell. It was either in the book or in the blog posts that were associated with what he was writing.
Extra stuff, yeah.
So the additional stuff, yeah.
So to go back, obviously we started off in episode 48 with a look at definition, which is the first in the DEAL series of letters. The next episode was all about elimination. Then we moved on to automation last episode. And now, of course, we're at the liberation phase. So we thought what we'd do is go over those former sort of 3 steps a little bit tonight before we move on to talking about what liberation should be for you.
Yeah, because the thing is, once you get to liberation, you've got to make sure that you've liberated yourself from what you wanted to liberate yourself from. And that now that you've got either a lot of money or a lot of time or enough of both, a lot is relative, of course, to what your targets are. You got to make sure that those things that you defined back in that definition phase are still important. They still make sense. They're still valid for you. Because if you've gotten through this whole cycle, if you've gone through the DEA, that's an interesting 3 letters. Not many people that we're talking to have gone through the DEA. Excuse me. So if you've gone through those 3 steps, then, okay, I've hit L, I've hit liberation. Is that where I was headed? Did I end up getting sidetracked and make some decisions along the way that didn't really get me to where I was going? Or maybe I got to where I was going and that's not really where I want to be now.
Or maybe the time between the D phase and the L phase has been long enough to change, the objectives of the L phase for you.
And how often does that happen? I can not think of a longer term goal that I've set myself that hasn't moved.
Exactly.
And become something else, either completely or slightly.
So I guess that's the first point that we want to make tonight is when you look back at the D stage, the definition stage, allow for slippage in your timelines and also allow for changes in the things that you define. Almost create yourself a review period like you would in a job.
And if you find yourself in a different spot to where you expected to be, it's not necessarily a negative. It could be quite the positive. You still may have liberated yourself from the work, from what was tying you back. You might have removed certain people or certain systems or whatever the case may be that were restricting you. So there's a lot of positives to be gained, even if you've gotten to a point and you've hit this liberation target that you set yourself, and it doesn't feel right. You can still look back and see what you've done, and there are a lot of positives there. So maybe it's time to reevaluate, set some new goals, so get back into that definition phase, and maybe that target is a little bit closer than it was originally. So it's very cyclic. There's iteration involved. It's not always as simple as, unfortunately, it's not always as simple as putting the points down on a piece of paper and just ticking them off.
Exactly. So I guess moving on to the elimination phase, this was the phase where you'd already defined what you wanted to do. Now you were trimming away the fat, so to speak, from around the ideas, from around the things that you need to achieve your goals that you defined in the first step. So have you eliminated enough stuff when you come to the liberation phase? Have you eliminated too much stuff? Those are the questions you might be asking yourself.
And how has it affected me getting to where I am now?
And how will the reintroduction of those things once you are liberated affect your life? I think it's a really interesting question.
We were talking about that whole going down the path and adhering to a very strict kind of methodology, and we used the terminology, the GTD methodology as an example. And then finding out maybe that's too strict, and you can, with that knowledge, jump back into just doing it your own way with that understanding. So going through this DEAL methodology first off, the first time you go through it, it might just be your apprenticeship. It might be the way that you learn how this whole thing flows. And it may be that you need to go back and define some new stuff. Like you might get to the end of this particular journey and find out that you didn't travel it correctly and you want to start again. There's nothing wrong with that. And even if you got to where you wanted to go to, then the next adventure still requires the same steps. It's just that you have some experience. And the further and further you go, the better you get at it.
Yeah, I guess we should remember that Tim Ferriss was talking about this in the context of what he called his muse business, which was something that you create and then automate in order to support your lifestyle and to support you to do the things that you want to do in your life without having to be chained to it all the time. So
that was his main idea, but he did tweak this DEAL protocol methodology to like cubicle workers, and I'm pretty sure he changed it around. So it was definition, elimination, liberation, and then automation. And I think the reason he did that was like liberation from your cubicle, like remove yourself from that office structure that you're in, and then automate stuff.
Yep. Yeah, I remember him talking about, if you can get work from home days, then you can automate stuff and spend less time doing those things and work more on your own ideas. Yeah.
So that's the beautiful thing about the whole protocol. Just it can fit. You can make it fit to what you're doing.
You can, can't you?
We did say previously that Tim uses it these days for his VC investments.
So that was the elimination phase. Automation we talked about last episode, so it should be fresh in everyone's minds. Don't need to cover it too much, but essentially automation is so you can step away from the coalface of your business or your ideas or the things that you're doing day to day.
Implementing systems that are simple and work. And we talked about having either staff or software or a combination of the two to actually run those systems.
Yeah, exactly. So you were saying before, Adam, the definition might not still be valid once you get to the liberation stage, but you can't be liberated without those last two steps, can you? Elimination and automation.
And I think that's where you're going to learn most of the valuable bits and pieces are in the middle stages, the elimination and the automation, because most people know how to define what they want or what they're trying to get, maybe not in the level of detail that's truly required, but the actual work is in the eliminating and the automating. There's a lot of thinking. There's a lot of different paths that these could go down, and you've got to pick one. And you have to make a decision. You have to be courageous enough to make the call and know that it could be wrong.
Yeah.
So that's where the work is. And I would honestly say most people would fail to reach their liberation points because they cannot do the elimination phase, holding on too tight, like wanting to be involved in everything. So
I think that's replicated across a lot of different areas in people's lives. Elimination is one of the most difficult things.
Yeah. We, Erica and I, that's my wife for everyone out there, we are in this consistent sort of 4 weekly cycle of finding stuff in the house that we don't use and just removing it.
Mm.
And it's very cathartic. It's very cathartic. Like just the elimination of stuff that you don't need or that doesn't add to your life, whether it's, books, stuff that you don't need in the house, like a chair that's never been sat in, or presents that you got for Christmas 10 years ago that you never opened, even because they're hard to throw out or give away to charity or re-gift because someone important to you might have given them to, but you're never going to use it. So at some point you have to, right, that's got to go.
I've got a whole day this weekend assigned to that, actually.
Brilliant. I'm going to get out to the garage shortly and do it. So getting back to this whole simplification thing, that's how it applies to your life. You can do that kind of stuff in your business. I do it at the gym all the time where I'll look around and consider what kind of equipment's not being used. And if there's stuff in the gym, whilst it might be functional, it might work very well for our training philosophy. If there's a big piece of equipment that gets used once a month and it's taking up room and I can use it for something else, then there's a decision that needs to be made. Do we remove that thing?
Yeah.
Even though it's a cool piece of equipment, do we get it out of the way and do we do something else? I caught the train. Sorry, you go first, mate.
I was going to say, I think that's a really great way to visualize when you're eliminating stuff once you've defined things and you're starting to eliminate. That analogy is a great way to sort of visualize it, I think, in your head and to say, okay, I've got this piece of equipment sitting here. Am I going to put it to use or am I going to chuck it out? That's the choice, isn't it, really? Because the longer it sits there, it's like Sherlock Holmes used to say, my mind's like an attic and I can only store so many things up there.
Yeah.
So
that's a brilliant way of thinking about it. And the whole equipment, you can hoard all this kind of stuff because maybe one day you'll use it. But then you can put dollars and cents on everything and you can say, okay, this piece of equipment takes up 4 square meters and 4 square meters costs me $400 a week or whatever it may be. Therefore, it's costing me this much. You can quantify how much it's costing you in a whole different array of things. So back to the story I was going to tell you. This is just something I noticed today that made me think about how people hold on to things. So I caught the train into the city today to go and do some jiu-jitsu. On the way back, right on the train line, there is a container, like a shipping container yard. And for years, it was a golf driving range, but in the middle of an industrial area. And it didn't get a lot of traffic. Like people didn't go there to play golf because it was in the middle of, the industrial west.
Sure.
So at some point, the owner worked out that they had to change it. And now, look, they might have sold the land or they might have given up their lease and someone else might have taken it over, but they let go. But I have this sort of romantic vision in my head that the owner of that place just went, hang on a minute. I've got all this land in an industrial park. And my dream is to have a golf driving range, but that's clearly not working. But I can still use this. And bang, it's huge, this container park now. And I'm thinking he's let go of one dream, but now this is like the avatar I have in my head of this person, has a business that's making money. So maybe what he can do now is go and play golf more. Maybe he's up at St Andrews playing golf.
Absolutely.
Sometimes letting go of what you think is your dream, and it's not a failure. It might be the way to actually get you to your dream via a different, maybe potentially more circuitous route.
Different route.
I kind of went on a tangent there, but I think it kind of illustrates how you can let go.
And it illustrates liberation too, how liberation, once you get there, might be something different than you actually think it is.
Well, how many times have you held on to ideas that you think are going to either make money or make you famous or make you feel really good, and you keep pushing, you spend all this time on them, and you don't get anywhere, and it ends up weighing you down. You've got to liberate yourself from that stuff as well.
Well, that point is very relevant to the quote this week. This one comes from Voltaire.
And I had to get the translation because I wasn't going to read the French.
The dinner of the Count of Boulainvière, I would say.
I'm going to let you.
It is difficult to free fools from the chains they revere.
Should read it again.
I wish they had the French in there. It is difficult to free fools from the chains they revere.
I could probably find the French, but then we'd just be murdering another language.
True. It is one of my aims to relearn French this year.
Relearn French? I understand how French is put together, but I can't pronounce it. just sound like a bogan from the West trying to speak French. It doesn't work.
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah, you do. I remember listening to a CD from a French language teacher who was just like, you just have to get the ball over the net, and the worst thing that can happen is they don't hit it back, and then you just serve another one. And hopefully...
Maybe that's a description of language. You have been listening to Simplify My Small Business, episode 51, with myself, Simon Hampson.
And me, Adam Stanecki.
Thanks for listening this week. We'll be back again in 2 weeks. And of course, you can visit the website at www.simplifymysmallbusiness.com for much, much more.
And if you've got an idea for an episode, something that you'd like covered, get in touch with us. We are open to suggestion and flattery and bribes. Thanks for listening.